Welcome to the May 24th, 2022 City Council special meeting. Thank you for joining us in this virtual meeting format we're using as our state and community continue to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. For special meetings like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling in to one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. And thank you again for joining us. I now call the May 24th, 2022 special meeting of the Eugene City Council to order. The single item on this special meeting agenda is for council to take action on the middle housing ordinance. There is currently a motion on the table that was made and seconded at council's Wednesday, May 18th work session. The motion that is on the table is move to adopt an ordinance concerning middle housing, including exhibits A and B attached thereto as set forth in its entirety as attachment C to the May 18, 2022 agenda item summary. And as I stated that I would do on May 18th, I will first call on Councilor Clark so that he can make his motion to amend the ordinance. So with that, Mike, you have the chair.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to make this motion. If I get a second, I will speak to it. Move to amend ordinance section 12, table 9.2750's maximum lot coverage for lots with duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes found on page 22 of the ordinance and page 29 of the May 18th council packet. Change the R1 maximum lot coverage from 75% to 50%.
Second.
Thank you. My preference all along has been, and I did it ungracefully in our last meeting with this amendment, so thank you for letting me bring it back. My intention all along has been that I thought the wise course of action was to adopt the minimum standards and for us to have the scheduled and planned work sessions on some of these other concern items that are pretty widely concerns in the community. And as we're not doing that, I will settle for doing it this way, but frankly, if we go through appropriate, say, tree protection in the fall, I may be willing to revisit this at 75%. I'm not particularly I'm not particularly wed to a number. What I am is interested in making sure that we do our protection work properly. So to me, this seems like the wise way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mike, for kicking us off. Counselor, we're not in work. Well, we are in work session. Counselor, I in the interest of compromise and recognizing, in the interest of consistency, Springfield and Bend, respectively, just adopted a 60% lot coverage size. Would you entertain a friendly motion to amend to 60?
I don't think I'll accept that as a friendly, only because on an issue this important, I think we all ought to vote on it. And I think the community ought to see how we voted.
Okay. Mayor, if I still have the floor, I don't see my timer going. I move to substitute with a motion to amend ordinance section 12, table 9.2750's maximum lot coverage for lots with duplexes, triplexes, or fourplexes found on page 22 of the ordinance and page 29 of the May 18th council packet to change the R1 maximum lot coverage from 75 to 60%.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on this motion? Greg, and then Randy.
So why 60%? Are you just picking a number out of the air?
Well, splitting it in half, Counselor, is 62.5, and I'm just rounding down because of 60 seems to be a more palatable number. It's a nice, easy rounding number, and for consistency's sake, Springfield and Bend have adopted 60. So to allow for ease and consistency with our building community, that's why 60 is on the table, not 62.5.
I won't support that compromise.
Okay, Councilor Groves, Randy?
Thank you, Mayor. I've been trying to find something in the middle, and this probably comes as close to that as I've seen so far. At the same time, I guess I do have a question regarding how we even got to the 50, well, the 50% I understand, but the 75% and exactly how that, what that is based on. I too am concerned about tree canopy, but we also need housing for people. It's just trying to find out what we can do here that's reasonable. My hope was similar to Councillor Clark's, and the reason I did vote originally for the minimal adoption was not that that's where I wanted it to stop, but that's where I wanted it to start. So then we could have more data, be more thoughtful on each one of these elements as we moved forward. You know, and again, I've received a lot of people asking me why, and that was my rationale. And again, it's trying to find a way to move into this in a thoughtful way where we really understand what it is we're doing and have a better idea of the cause and effect relationships. So I'm gonna think about this, Councillor Keating. I appreciate you trying to find that middle ground, but my mind's not made up quite yet. Thank you.
Okay, Claire and then Jennifer.
Yeah, just a point of order. I would encourage councilors to remember that remarks should be directed towards the mayor and not each other. And I was a little disturbed at the tone of hostility that I heard in a previous councilor's question that was directed towards Councilor Keating. It is not a number just grabbed out of the air. It has a rational basis in the chart that staff showed us, that the minimum lot coverage really comes into play at around the 62 percentile of lot coverage. And beyond that, a lot of lots can't use the 75%. So it was a way to kind of acknowledge that the 75% may not even be utilized, and has sparked fear in some folks, whilst not giving up completely on the idea that we try to maximize lot coverage to create more housing, which is the point. I don't know the rationale behind why Bend and Springfield chose 60%, but they must have seen some value in landing on that mark. And I, complained last night about the fact that as a council, we are getting really close to basically throwing out all the work that the Planning Commission endeavored so hard on, with, input from members of our community who typically don't get to provide input on issues of this kind. And I feel it's important for us to continue to try to find ways not to completely get rid of that and fall back to minimums. So I believe this is a rational benchmark to set. You could view it as a compromise, but I actually just think it's more practical.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm willing to support the 60%. I think I would be okay with 75, but I think some people have made some good arguments, and for consistency with Springfield, I can be there. I share Mike's interest in ensuring that we can try to save our canopy, but I think this is one of those things that sounds like it's doing that, but it doesn't actually protect the trees. It's just protecting uncovered land. You could still build whatever you want to build right on top of that tree. I mean, you get to shift where the 50 or 60% is. So it isn't actually protecting the tree. You're just hoping that it might protect the tree. So I think it's be a lot smarter for us to look at this again in the fall. If we want to make protections for trees, make protections for trees, rather than getting at it at this sideways way that might not actually do that. So I'm more than comfortable supporting the 60%, but I think 50 would be a mistake.
Alan?
More years, I'll figure out which buttons to push. Yeah, I was going to say something similar to Claire, that the 60% comes from the chart. If you look at the chart that we got from staff about what was utilizable, it's actually, more than half of the lots can't use 75%. So, and 60% seems like a reasonable number when you look at the chart. It's like right in the middle of the larger size 100 by 100-foot width lots. So as far as the canopies going, that issue I toyed with that and struggled with this whole issue quite a bit. But the canopy issue is that there is the tree protections that we have today are still in place. We didn't get rid of that. Whether or not they're adequate or not, the people who said 4 square miles are going to be lost to canopy, which isn't even close to true, because this is A, voluntary. Most people won't use the full amount, and B, there's no guarantee at all that we can that people will plant any trees. And if we think this is controversial, wait until we bring up the tree canopy issue and pre-preservation, where we talk about people can't cut down trees, or they can't, or they have to plant trees if that's where people want to go. And some people do want to go there, by the way. So the tree canopy issue, getting back to 30% is really what that issue should be about. And my understanding is with the existing rights of way and parks and other city-owned properties, we could do that without even impacting private property. So that's a more appropriate way to get to the tree canopy issue in my mind. So I could support this compromise as well. I think it's a happy medium.
Thank you. Emily?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted 50% all along for a lot of reasons besides trees. Trees are really important to me, but I just hate to lose that space and heat islands and choice for people. And if it was 50%, then it would affect all of the lots. It's okay, 75% doesn't make a difference, but 60% actually does. However, I can tell that if I support 50%, I'll lose, and it will be 75. So therefore I need support 60.
Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. It's my opinion that all of these numbers are frankly pretty arbitrary. I agree with that was said, but I would comment on Alan's point that tree protection isn't siloed. All of these ordinances have effects on one another. And whether or not somebody builds out to the edges of what they have the capacity to build or not is the question. So with the 75% number, someone can build to the capacity, and there's no tree protection. So what you have to believe in order to believe what you're saying is that no one or very few people will build to the capacity of a 75% number. And I just disagree with that. I think they absolutely will. And not only that, but if you look at it, it's interesting how many people from Better Housing to all the organizations that make the arguments about how the duplex and triplex middle housing model will create more affordable housing. That's one of and it absolutely won't. But that's one of the major arguments that's been made throughout this process. So it still costs, $300 a square foot to build a building. It doesn't matter what the size of the building it is. And if you say you can cover 75% of the structure of a lot with a structure, you're just building more square feet and making it less affordable. So if you're putting forward the argument that we should be at 75% on all of these lots with a structure, you're making the argument that we should be building things that are less affordable and more expensive. And I don't know that that's a good idea either. I think it's important for us to consider the lot coverage question from both of the things it has the capacity to do, save a few trees and make for less expensive things getting built. Catherine, I had one other legal question. Because of our internal process agreements, we've always had the existing rule that you can't amend an amendment. So I'm assuming that in this particular case, it is okay with our process agreements that you can make a motion to swap.
Substitute.
Thank you. You can make a motion to substitute on an amendment.
Yes, and actually, Councilor Clark, I know you and I have had this conversation a number of times. So I actually, because it's come up a couple of times, I took a pretty deep dive into the question of amending an amendment or doing a substitution for amendment. And I can find nothing that actually doesn't allow that. So what I would fall back on is parliamentary procedure. Parliamentary and Robert's rules aren't actually the same, but parliamentary procedure says you can amend an amendment, you can substitute an amendment, you can't amend an amendment. So really, when you get to that, and
when you get to three, it's a problem.
It's the three, right? It's really right. So. But I appreciate you having raised this before, so I didn't want to just take a guess. So I actually did take a really very intentional look at this. Right. And so we're okay. If this was a motion to amend or a motion to substitute, I would say it was fine under Robert's rules and parliamentary and your adopted operating.
Cool. And I didn't want to use that as a reason for people not to vote for Councilor Keating's motion. I just wanted to make sure that whatever we did ended up legal, right, and correct. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Greg, do you have a comment on this motion?
Oh, not so much comment. My apologies to Councilor Keating. I'm a little out of sorts right now because I am, quite frankly, angry about something else that has nothing to do with this discussion. So my apologies, Councilor Keating, and to the rest of the council, because I'm really a little bit out of sorts today. I'll put it to you that way.
Happens to
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Greg. And I very much appreciate your stepping up in that way, and that's very gracious. Thank you. I think we're ready for a vote on the substitution. I did want to say one thing about this, which is that the purpose that we are striving is to reduce barriers to building middle housing. And so the value of allowing a little extra coverage of land is that it provides for some flexibility. And as the Planning Commission and as staff were developing these recommendations, they worked with a lot of local builders and architects in sort of coming up with what were some of the reasonable criteria. So it's established in a graph. We heard from one of those builders last night talking about how these changes, these are the very builders that we want to encourage to build housing in our community, and they have played an active role in helping to come up with these code changes. So I think it's important, and I'm happy to have this vote on this substitution. So on the table is a vote to substitute. All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed, 1. Okay, thank you. And then we will.
I said kind of opposed, not really, but
kind. Okay, well, it's a yes or a no.
It's a no.
It's a no. Okay.
I gotta choose one or the other. It's a no because I'm the 50. So yeah.
There you go. There you go. Okay, thank you. And so now we need to vote on the motion on the as amended. So all in favor of the motion as amended, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that passes 8-0. Thank you very much. And then we are ready to go back to the main motion of the ordinance, and that is on the table and seconded. So but okay. So I keep trying to go and then it seems hands raising. So I've got both Matt and then Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to be clear, the motion is on the table as amended.
Right, as
okay.
amended.
Thank you. That was point number one. Point number two was Councilor Evans never owes me an apology, my friend. I thank you. Apology accepted, but you never need to apologize to me, Greg.
Okay, and Mike, a comment?
I only raised my hand because I thought there were other motions that other councilors had communicated they were interested in making.
I don't have any on the table right now. So what's on the table?
Call the question, Mayor.
Yep. Well, I have Greg.
Actually, a couple hours ago, I sent out 2 proposed motions. One on infrastructure, and the other one was on goal 15. I don't know whether everybody received that or not, but I did put those proposed changes out. So I'm not sure if that was in time for that to get as part of this discussion or not. But you know, Mike is right. I tried to put those out there so that we could have at least some conversation around them.
You sent them out as an email, Greg?
Yes, I did. It should be in all of your emails.
Councilor Clark?
Yeah, I brought that up in the first place, having seen that email, because his comments around infrastructure parallel mine from our previous discussion and our previous meeting. I have real concerns that we're putting the cart in front of the horse with this. And so I wanted to at least hear staff's response to some of the potential pieces that were in the motion Greg emailed that he might make, and just understand the impacts with regard to the definitional pieces of the goal. So if nothing else, I'd still love to hear staff say why it's a good idea or a bad idea for us to have more accurate definitions of what sufficient infrastructure is in the way that Councilor Evans penned them. Does anybody want to comment on that?
It feels really awkward because the motion's not on the table. So I'm just trying to figure out where to weigh in here. I mean, we tried to present a little bit in the last couple of meetings around, what was in the findings and what Public Works looked at and the amount of studies they did and how we feel we've met those needs in the findings. I don't know that we have more to share beyond that.
I'll try a different question then. How's that? I would love to know the impacts if any counselor were to make the motions that provide more clear definition to sufficient infrastructure. What would be those impacts if someone made that motion?
And are you talking about the impacts on tonight's process? Because I don't even know.
I'm talking about the impacts to our ability to build and our ability to get things permitted and done, because I wasn't, and I just want to say I respect and appreciate, Sarah, your points about how our conversation went the other night. I didn't feel as though I got clear answers to the questions I had, but that's because I was asking unsophisticated questions. So I'm trying to just ask a more precise question. It seems that to me as though Councilor Evans' motions that he typed out prescribe a very particular manner in which we would prove goal 11 sufficiency on some of this stuff. And I want to know what the impact of us passing something like that would be.
Okay, so I'm going to do a big caveat on this because all of us received the motions and I read them 15 minutes before this meeting. So I don't know that we've had time to read them and evaluate them. If we have, and Lauren or somebody on the call feels they can answer that question and be accurate, I'm comfortable with that, but I want you to be really honest I don't want to wing it.
Sarah, I'm in the same position that you are. I don't have anything to offer beyond the discussion that took place at I think it was the May 18th work session, Councilor Clark, where we talked about, that we do have standards in Chapter 9 and the 9.6 thousands that require an applicant to show that the development that they're proposing can be served, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, I
And
have, looks
if I
like.
could, Mayor, with my last.
Oh, sorry.
All right. May I hear a little more? Is it because you haven't had time to process it and it's a complex question, or is it because there's potential liability involved to the city?
I'll jump in here. I mean, we literally saw them within the last 20 minutes. So we're just not in a position to comment on the specificity or the specifics of, because you're talking about the language that he penned. And so we're just not in a place to comment on it. We have had no time to do analysis, and you're looking for some analysis. So
you guys, and thank you. I will accept and appreciate your answer, but you're making my point, which is that we shouldn't be asking ourselves these questions yet until we've thoroughly vetted whether or not we have appropriate infrastructure. We shouldn't be doing this. We should be holding that part of this conversation first, after having passed the minimum required, so that we don't have to go back and fix this later and create lawsuits in the process. So I'll drop it at this point. Thank you.
Okay, I want to step in. We don't have any motions on the table. Greg has his hand raised. Did you want to clarify these?
Mayor, given the lateness of my messages, I would think that at our next conversation about this, that it may be more appropriate for me to submit these motions at that time. I do have concerns about Goal 11, and most specifically, having the appropriate infrastructure support for the development of housing, of duplexes, triplexes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, as far as Clause A with public sewer system hookups, water system hookups, private, streets and access for emergency vehicles, storm drainage, that may take a longer, deeper conversation than we have tonight. But I'm willing to work with whatever we can to have this conversation and make this, from my perspective, go right.
Okay, Alan and then Claire.
Well, the presumption in this motion, both of these ideas, they're not motions, is that we don't know what we're doing, that the public works people that we have and the planning people, staff that we have, and the permitting professionals that we have don't do their job. And frankly, I think it's kind of insulting to them to suggest that none of this occurs. Maybe staff can address, well, I won't ask. We do a hell of a lot of planning for structure. All these types of infrastructure, water, sewer, all roads, all that stuff is well planned out. Lots of ordinances and rules about that from Public Works, and you have to meet them in order to get there. And then once it gets approved well, there's the planning part of it. And then once it gets to permitting, it has to have the services before it gets a permit. So all of this is kind of not necessary because it's stuff that we already do. I understand, Greg, I don't think you mean it to be insulting to the professionals, but I think other people don't care if they are insulting to the professionals that we have on our staff. And sometimes city council just shouldn't play planner and engineer, even though we played them on TV. It's just not a good idea. And on Goal 15, it really looks like what we already do. And it's not necessary. And I guess this is just too late. I mean, we've been doing this for 2 years, and this comes up at 11:59 and 59 seconds. I think that's not the way that we should be conducting business.
Thank you. Claire.
Yeah, so city manager, if we pass this final motion on action, are we going to be discussing this middle housing again?
No, if you take action, you're taking action on the ordinance. There's some pieces that you've identified you want to have future work sessions on that we'll pick up in the fall, but that's unrelated to this ordinance.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I am sympathetic with Alan's response, and I would say Springfield just passed their middle housing ordinance, and they've got a lot less staff than we do. They have to meet all the goal criteria, land use goal criteria, just like we do, and Ben does, and Salem, and everybody else who's having to do this. So I think this is, you know, an unfounded fear that we've got to embed these references into the code. I also agree it's a little late in the process to be throwing this on the table. I know it's not officially on the table. If it is a really serious concern, then I think like the solar access work session and the tree ordinance work session, and many of you have said, well, we can revisit this again later and fix it. It could be a discussion to have at a future date.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to give you one more round and then we're going to vote. So I've got Mike and then Greg, and then I'll call a vote.
All right, Mayor, thank you very much. I only add 2 things. Number one, Councillor Evans, I was saying the things I was saying because I believe that if this is not amended any further this evening, then that's it, we're done. And so this is your only option to put those things forward if you want. And although it's inconvenient and timed at the last minute, and some people don't care for that, it is still your right as a councillor to make any motion you want to make. You risk not winning it, but that's the truth. And to Alan, I had no intention at all to insult anyone specifically, and most importantly, staff. Our staff are great. They do fantastic work. I ask hard questions. And I don't think that's the same thing as being mean or insulting. I think that it is our duty and not theirs to ensure we have appropriate public facilities. And I want to make sure I'm doing my job, that we can actually build any of the things that we passed, and that we don't end up arguing about the sufficiency of this forever, and that it doesn't cost us 3 times as much as sprawl because of what has to be dug out of the ground, remediated, and rebuilt in order for things to be sufficient. And I don't believe necessarily that we've had specific enough study of it. And the reason is because I asked that very question the other night. I said, can you tell me, show me the study on which that sufficiency report from Public Works was given? And the answer was no. They told us that we'll be fine. That's the reason I was asking those questions the other day, is that in any time staff does an analysis like this, there's a study that shows the sufficiency. And that's all I was asking for, didn't get. And so I'm saying if we don't address this now somehow, I think it's going to come back to bite us, whether we revisit it in the fall or the winter or not. So I appreciate your comments, but I wanted to clear that up. Thank you.
Okay, I have 2 more counselors' hands raised. Then really we need to wrap this up. Greg and then Alan.
I'll be brief about this. So I can read the room. Even if I put these motions on the table now, they probably won't pass. But I would like to have a work session on these issues at a later date, because we can always go back and amend or fix or adjust things as we move along. Nothing is ever completely solid or locked down. We always have the opportunity to change our minds when we want to, as we see things that are unfolding. And so I would ask that we have an opportunity to discuss both issues around Goal 11 and Goal 15. And this is no aspersions on staff. Staff has done a very good job and worked hard on this. But I'm with Mike. You know, there are concerns that, you know, people have expressed to us in the public that I think that this council needs to have conversation around. So I won't be putting forth the motions at this point. However, I will be looking to have these conversations at some point down the line in the future, and we can get back to the main motion and deal with that after this round of conversation by council.
Okay, Alan.
Just to be clear, Mayor, I in fact said I don't think Councilor Evans or Councilor Clark were trying to insult staff. I think the motion does. And I think it would be great to have a public session to educate people who don't know how our system works, to get them up to speed so they wouldn't put forward motions like this. And that would be great, so that they could understand the great work and professional work that our public works and our engineering and our permitting and planning staffs all do to make sure that all these things get dealt with and all of the goals of our land use planning goals are adequately addressed.
Okay, thank you. No, it's been like I'm sorry, what's that?
Point of order.
Okay.
When does, if passed, when does the motion we're about to vote on take effect?
I'll speak to that. So the charter provides that the ordinance goes into effect 30 days after approved by the council and the mayor. So it's actually the signature, and we have to get it finalized. There's a change, and so we have to make that change. And so ultimately the day, I don't know exactly the day, I assume it will be in the next day or a couple that the mayor signs it. And then on the 31st day is when it's actually in effect. So
could we amend for immediate effect? There are constituents who asked me that question.
I'm sorry, could you ask the?
Could we amend to take effect immediately?
You could move to amend the ordinance to add an immediate effective date. If that passes, then you could, then if the motion to amend to add an immediate effective date passes and the ordinance passes with 2/3 vote, it would be immediately effective.
Thank you.
Lauren?
Yeah, if I may, the only thing that I would add to Catherine's answer is that in this particular case, to have a date certain as the effective date, the way the ordinance is drafted is 30 days after approval by the council and signature by the mayor, or June 30th, whichever is later. So in this case, it would probably be June 30th would be the effective date.
Thank you, Lauren.
Okay, I think we're ready for a vote. So all in favor of the main...
Oh, never, it's moved.
Sorry, but ready for a vote. Yes, all in favor of the main motion as amended, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you. It passes. Thank you very much. This has been hard work. These have been hard conversations. We have a lot of work to do with our community to bring everyone on board with the work that you've done. And I have hope that this ordinance will, in fact, enable us to build much more of the housing that we need in this community, and that we will see progress. And appreciate all of your efforts. I appreciate how much pressure you've all been under. Very much appreciate the staff work and the support you have given us in this deliberation, which has been long and detailed and sometimes felt circuitous. So thank you very, very much for all you've done. And with that, we are adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank you all.